air circulating. Okay, just want to make sure it is recording. And the mic is a little far from me. I'm not sure whether that's the best place to put it. So I will move it a little bit closer, but I don't want it to be too close to pick up all the keyboarding. So let's see. I think this is better. Okay, there we go. Okay, so the first thing we'll do today is a review of all the stuff that we have talked about so far, because we have an exam on next Monday. So what we'll do today is we'll talk about the topics that will be included, and if we have time left, then I'll go ahead and talk about something that's related to your projects, because there are several projects, not several, but many projects that involve being able to use a database from different installation of the application. And there's one experimental feature of App Inventor that may be useful for that. So I think if we can get that to work, it'll be great. If not, we can just kind of mock up and say, okay, we'll just pretend that we are communicating through a network. So the stuff that I just wrote today is right after the last homework assignment. So if you scroll all the way down to the end of the topic, which is drawing in 2D, it's at the very end. It's called Exam 1 Review. I just typed it up this morning, and it starts with a disclaimer. So the disclaimer says this is not an exhaustive list of topics that will be on Exam 1. It is a starting point for you guys to look into the material for Exam 1. Anything that I talk about in class and during lab, and not explicitly stated as this will not be in an exam, will be subject to be included in the exam. Okay, and I cannot remember everything that I talked about in class. I remember most, but not all. So the way I will come up with the questions is I'm going to review my own class recording to come up with the questions, the material for the exam. So what does that tell you about studying for this class? You should do the same. Okay, just kind of go through that stuff. If you feel that most stuff is like, oh, okay, we talked about this, it's no big deal, I already understand it, it's not a big concern. The exam is open book, open notes, and open web. Okay, you're going to do it on the computer. Okay, it's a practical exam. You will be writing code or fixing code or doing something with App Inventor in the exam. This is not a paper test. The only thing that is not allowed during the exam is communication with another person. In other words, a particular student's submission should only reflect that particular person's academic performance, and not somebody else's. That's the only restriction. Okay, if you want to Google search, hey, be my guest. If you think, okay, I remember there's a 3-minute video that I saw on YouTube that talk about exactly this thing, and I kind of forget how it's done, go look for it, watch it again, bring your headphones so you can listen to it. Okay, that does not bother me at all. Okay, because it is about how you apply what you have learned. This is not about whether you can remember everything that you have seen. Is that okay? Questions? Questions? All right. All right. So with that out of the way, I am going to go over the main concepts that we have talked about up to this point. The first one is event-driven programming. Okay, that's just a concept. I'm not going to test you on event-driven programming and ask you for the definition. That would just be looking up something. You just have to look up Wikipedia and find the definition. So event-driven programming simply means there's nothing happening. Okay, your application is sitting around doing absolutely nothing until you do something. Okay, until you click a button, until the timer goes off, then it will start to do something. Even with sprites, okay, it is still the same thing. The sprite is doing its own thing. Okay, it's moving on its own with a set direction and a set velocity. Okay, it does not require any code to do that. It's only when it touches an edge, then you have to write some code and say, okay, now we need to bounce. Okay, so your program is reacting to events, and these events can be based on the user interaction for the most part, clicking something, dragging something, and so on. It can also be because of a timer going off. It can also be because of a sprite, hitting something, colliding with another object. Okay, so that's collectively the idea is called event-driven programming. The second idea that we talked about and use a lot, this is the only type of programming that we can do in App Inventor, is object-oriented programming. Except we don't call those quote-unquote objects, we call those components. But the idea is the same. Okay, you have a button. So what do you do with the button? Well, you can intercept the click event. You can have a button to change the text on it. You can make a button display a bitmap instead of text. How do we know that? The first project, Hello Per, has an option to do that. Okay. We talked about variables. We talked about global variables, which means those can be seen anywhere in your program. Okay, and they are kind of the initialization is kind of floating outside of any event-driven block. Then we also talked about local variables, and those can only live within a particular block. Now, all the blocks nested within that block can also see these local variables, but not anything outside of it. Okay, which is kind of nice in a way because now you can reuse the same name in different blocks. We talked about subroutines. I talked about how to define it, but I don't expect you guys to define subroutines at this point. So don't worry if you don't know how to make your own subroutine. But I did talk about how to use a subroutine, so I expect most of you to know how to use a subroutine. Okay, if I give you one and I tell you what it does, okay, you should be able to make use of it. We talked about conditional blocks, okay, a lot of that, right? In order to find the minimum of something, we use conditional blocks. Okay, so that's something that we talked about quite a bit already. This stuff here, I don't think we really need to kind of go over it. We talked about all the math blocks for adding, subtracting, and doing all kinds of math work. We talked about comparison, okay, comparing for equal to, less than, greater than, and so on. We talked about random numbers, how to generate random numbers. You just give it a range, starting from here, ending here, and each time it'll give you a supposedly different and unexpected value. We talked about logical blocks. Okay, these things would include true and false constants, values. We also use the connective, which are basically what we call and or not in English. Are there any questions about the connectives? Or we can call those Boolean operators. There are many names for those things, but they do exactly the same thing. Any questions about the connectives, the logical connectives or logical operators? No, it's good. Okay. We talked about colors. Okay, we talked about the constant colors that you can just pick from the color tab. We also talked about how to mix your own color using RGB or red, green, and blue. Okay, so that's something that we did. We talked about text blocks. Okay, labels to be exact, and we are. Oh no, excuse me, I take it back. We talk about text blocks. We can make literal constants out of text blocks. You just basically specify, okay, this is exactly what the text block, the value of the text block. We can also join so that we can have multiple components kind of merge into one single block. Okay. We talked about how you can have blocks in blocks, which is the whole point of structured programming is you can have blocks in blocks. Now, whether you can have this type of block inside that type of block depends on whether they match or not. Graphically, can they connect? We also talked about lists. Okay, we talked about a simple list. We also talked about a list inside another list. Specifically, we talked about a key value pair list. Okay, which is really useful. We talked about it. I didn't really quite expand on that topic. We didn't have enough time to really expand and see how important it is. So I want you guys to know what it is. I want you guys to know how to use it because there is one block in the list tab that can make use of a key value pair list. In terms of components, we talked about screens, okay, which is the overall container of an application. We talked about arrangement, which allows you to arrange items in either a horizontal fashion, vertical fashion, or you can use a table. But when you use a table, you have to tell the table how many rows and how many columns you're going to have. Okay, but that's, that can be changed in the designer view. We talked about buttons. Okay, the only thing we talked about buttons, well, we talked about two aspects of buttons. Well, we talked about how to intercept the click event and also a long click event. Because if you remember, okay, does anyone remember how I used the long click event, or one of the uses of the long click event in this class?
Long click event, it was to reset the timer on the...
Reset the counter.
Oh, yeah.
Of the Costco, counter thing. Yep, exactly, good memory. Okay, so that's how we used it. Labels, pretty simple stuff. It just displays, a text value. We talked about a slider. A slider allows you to use a graphical medium to enter a particular value. And you can specify, where's the starting point and where's the ending point of a slider. And then, the slider itself will handle the interpretation of the position of the slider and give you the value. We talked about the canvas and sprite. These two are kind of together because a sprite can move around inside the canvas. Okay, we talked about that. In fact, the last two homework assignments were all related to sprites and the canvas. We talked about the notifier. Okay, how you can use it to alert the end user of something. Okay, you can also use it to initiate and ask the user to enter something, and to enter text value or enter a choice by clicking a particular button. We talked about a list picker, which is just a drop-down box allowing you to select one of multiple items, okay, which is really handy. We talked about the image component, which is static. Okay, it doesn't do anything. Hello Per has an image. We also talked about the clock component. The clock component has many uses, but we have only talked about how to use it as a timer. Okay, I want the screen background to change color for a half second. So we start the timer right after we change the color. When the timer expires, it generates its own event, and then we intercept the event and go like, okay, let's change the color back to where it was. Okay, so that's how we used the clock. We also talked about TinyDB. I had one particular program to show you guys how to store values so they can be retrieved. Let me change the screen size because I think people in the back cannot see it. There we go. All right, and then we talked about how to do specific things. One thing that I spent, I would say at least one class on is how do we deal with a multiple screen application. And the main reason I did that is because I looked at your project proposals, and many of your projects can use multiple screens. So I wanted to talk about multiple screen applications. When you have a multiple screen application, many times it would be useful to be able to pass values across the screens that you have designed. And in my example, which you only need to know, is how to pass a single value. But you need to know how to pass a single value from the first screen to the second screen. In other words, whatever screen is starting the next screen, you should be able to pass what we call a start value. But when the other screen closes because you press the back button, that screen should also be able to pass a value back to the first one. Okay, so we talked about the mechanism to do all that. We talked about how to compute distances from a sprite to the 4 different edges. Okay, and that's just your homework assignment. And by the way, during the exam, you can look at all the code that I have uploaded to Moodle. Okay, it's open book, open notes. Okay, that includes everything, all the resources on Moodle, and I'm not going to hide anything or take down anything, for the exam. So whatever you see right now is at least what you will have access to during the exam, unless the campus network goes down. Then we are all going to be doing stuff on paper outside the classroom because there won't be any lights. We talked about how to find a minimum of 3 particular values. Okay, so you should be able to extend that to 4 and so on. We talked about how to create and use lists at a very minimum level. Okay, not a very complex level. And this is the other one that I talked about a little bit earlier, how to use a clock to time events. Okay. So are there any questions about these particular things? These particular topics, concepts, ideas, how-tos? Any questions? Yep.
Can you use lists to store other things like sound or images?
Unfortunately, no. That's a very good question. As far as I know, you cannot. But you can store the file name of those things. So you don't have direct access, but you can store the file name. So it will still be useful depending on your application. Would that be helpful? Just to be able to store the file name of the file. Will still be okay? Okay. So that's what you can do, is to store just the file name. Any other questions? No other questions. Yep, go ahead. Next Monday. So you have 1 week to prepare. So my suggestion is to get started as soon as possible, so that on Wednesday, if you review the material and you spot something that go like, well, I listened to the lecture again, I read the online help of App Inventor, but I'm still kind of confused, or I don't understand exactly how it is done, or I have a question that was never addressed, either in class or by the documentation. Bring it to the class. Okay, I'm more than happy to go over those topics that you say, okay, I reviewed it, I studied it again, I did my own research, but I cannot find the answer to this question. Well, bring it to the class and we'll try to figure it out. Okay, any other questions? Any questions about what is and is not allowed in the test? The only thing that is not allowed is basically collaboration during the exam. You can study together before the exam, okay? In fact, I think that's a great idea. If you want to sit down together, you'll just kind of go through all the videos and then jot down notes together. That's fine with me, okay? You can even use the same Google document, as your quote-unquote cheat sheet during the exam. The only thing you don't want to do is to have a chat that goes along with the document during the test. So no interaction during the test. Okay. Any questions?
So we can use all previous programs?
Yes, you can. Yep. Anything that is done prior to the test, if it's your work particularly, obviously. But if you want to collect, the homework assignment of everybody else in class with their permission, you can bring that with you too. I would not see why you want to do that. But if you have a few people and then you guys work on different projects, other than ones in the class, and you want to bring that along, that's fine with me. In fact, if you go to App Inventor, there is a way to share projects. Okay, I cannot remember how to get to that part, but I will look for it now. App Inventor, share projects. Okay, let's see. Sharing and packaging. Google Play Store, no, that is not what I want. Okay, there's a place, but I cannot remember the link. Here we go, maybe this one. Gallery, that's it. Okay, so inside App Inventor, there's a gallery. Yep.
So for the exam, are we gonna have to create an app from scratch, or is it gonna be?
I have not decided yet. I just know for sure that you will need to use App Inventor to work on your questions. So there are several possibilities. One is I describe what your app is supposed to do. You start from scratch and you get it done. That's option number one. There's option number two. I give you a basic starting point and say, okay, this program is working up to this point. Now I want you to add a feature to this application so that now you can also do blah, blah, blah. Third option, okay, I give you a full up application, with all the features, but it's buggy. So you have to fix the bugs. Well, you have to discover the bugs potentially first, and then you have to fix the bugs. Okay, so those things are all possibilities. Okay, I am not narrowing down to any single one at this point. There may be a mixture of these three types of questions. There may be one where you start from scratch, one that you extend a program of mine, and then one that you fix a buggy program of mine.
Say option number one.
Hmm?
I say the first
The first one, start from scratch. That may or may not be the best thing to do, because sometimes, just don't. If I give you something that's more difficult and you have to start from scratch, that may not be, favorable. So, let me get to the gallery. Okay, right here. Okay, it has been here all along, and I just don't see it. Okay, the gallery is interesting. Okay, let me click on it. Where is it? Okay, now. Okay, so the gallery is very interesting because it has all kinds of projects that other people have contributed. This is not my code. This is all code that other people have written using App Inventor. So you can basically, okay, here's one that has multi-screen. Okay, I don't know what it does. And there are data. Good. Okay, so we can search for apps too. So if you want to look for, I don't know, let's say list, okay, because that's a very, I think that is an important topic. Okay, so you can find out, all of these programs, are, they have lists in it. So it's good for doing fun stuff too, okay? If you think that you have something that maybe somebody else has done already, you can go through the gallery and see if you can find a project that somebody else has done already. But it's not just an app. This is not an APK file that you just install on your phone. This is an AIA file. In other words, you get to see the source code, the blocks of how somebody else did something, okay? So it's a great way to learn programming, especially when you get to the point where you can learn something on your own, because now you can look at how other people do something and go like, oh, I never thought about doing it this way. Okay? So it's a good resource, and once again, this is also available as a resource during the exam. I don't think it's going to be very useful, okay, because I'm not going to pick one of these projects as a starting point. I mean, there are so many of these also, so but during your leisure and you just want to study or just find out how to do more app programming, this is a good resource. And it's built right into App Inventor. It's under the gallery link. Okay, any questions? No questions? Okay. So what I would do if I were taking this class is I would kind of quickly go through all the video, all the class recording, but not really watching everything, like the entire duration, because each one is 80 minutes. So that's going to take a long time. I would just kind of scan through the whole thing and see, okay, I check, I understand all this, I remember that day, scan through, okay, I see this, I understand it, I remember that day, and so on. Until you find something, go like, wait, hold on a second here. I don't remember, seeing this, or this is a topic that I really don't have a full understanding of. Then you can go over that again, okay? And all the time when you're doing that, I would time index the whole thing. Okay, just write down on a sheet of paper, on the spreadsheet of your own, write down the date, write down the timestamp of the topic. So next time, like during the test, if you need access to that content, you can quickly locate that portion. YouTube has a lot of nice features, in case you haven't noticed. Most people don't use YouTube this way, so they may not even notice that. Okay, so what YouTube can do is something like this. Let me go find a particular. There. I suppose I can go through my own videos. Okay, so let's say I'm studying. I go to my own video. Okay, my channel. No, that's not my channel. There we go. So I go to one of my videos. Let's say, cisp310, which is unrelated to this class. But I go to here and I kind of browse through the content. And, I think you guys know that you can do this, right? Just using the thumbnail, you can really quickly kind of glance through the whole thing. So let's say I glance through and I go to one particular place and go like, okay, this picture is really important, pause. Okay, I need to look at this again. So what you can do to kind of index this is to look at the file name, which is just you can right click, you can put a link to this particular video, okay? But you can also make it specific to this time. You guys know how to do that? You know how to? No? Okay. All right. So if you want to make a link like a URL to not only this video but to a particular time of this video, then you go down here and then you go to share. One of those things. Okay, click share. And you can select whether you want to include the start time as a part of the URL. So now, when you look at this URL here, I'm just going to demonstrate this. I just do a Control-C to copy the URL, and I paste it on the new. Okay, just to be sure that this works. Okay, I go to a new private window, which means it does not even share any cookies or any information with my other browser. Okay, so I just paste it here. Now in this particular window, I have not even logged in. Okay, so YouTube has no association with this particular window. Okay, it has not stored anything here. So this is brand new as far as YouTube is concerned, and it goes straight to that moment of that video. Is that okay? All right, so how is this going to help me? Well, one thing that is going to be helpful is you don't have to go through the entire video again. If you have a table of index, okay, to the content of the class recording, only the ones that are relevant to you, okay, and everybody is going to have a different list. Some people look at certain topics and go like, oh, this is stuff I don't need to look up, this I don't need to look up, wait, hold on, this one here, this one I might need to refer back to. Then you can make a link to it. Where do you put that link? Well, you guys all have apps accounts, right? So what you do is go to your apps.losrios.edu account. Okay, apps. I said apps and I typed without the S here. So you sign in to your account. I think I typed in the wrong password. Nope, I did correct it. Okay, so you go to your Google Drive. How many people in this class use your Google Drive in your apps thing? Okay, not a whole lot. Okay, I personally think it's really helpful. Okay, so you can make a new folder. Okay, make a new folder and just call that, study preparation. Okay, now go into that particular folder, and if you're taking multiple classes and you think, oh, this is a great resource, I want to use it for different classes, then you want to create a folder for each class. So cisp362 is a folder. And then what you do, there are many ways you can do this, but I would do it this way. I would use a spreadsheet to do it. Okay, so I will open a new spreadsheet and make sure I change the name of the spreadsheet, okay, as exam 1 cheat sheet. Okay. Okay, and now I can say, okay, I can now go back to my video here, and I go like, okay, this is just an example. Okay, so you want to have a column for description and another column for URL. So the description column can be CPU design in Logic Sim. Not that this is important in cisp362, but that's what that content is. And then just paste the link here. Okay, so you are creating a online document on the fly using the time-stamped URL from YouTube, and this is available to you during the exam. Okay, you don't have to bring your paper, you don't have to bring a flash drive. There's nothing to forget except for your password to sign in. If you forget that, you'll be in big trouble anyway. Okay, is that okay? So I personally think this is a great resource because now you can say, okay, if you need any extra information, okay, so let's say you want to also remember the date, okay, of the lecture. You just go back here and go like, oh, okay, this is February 25th. So you just enter the date here, 2/25. Okay, then here's the date. So now you can use a spreadsheets feature to sort it by date. Okay, then you have a chronological order of all the videos, and each one has a link to a specific topic. But you still need to put in your time to do it. I cannot do this for you because I don't know what is important to you. Okay, if I try to do this, for the entire class, then I'll have like maybe 20, 30 links here per lecture, It will just be more confusing than anything else. Okay, but this is a resource. This is a resource available to you for exams in this class and also for homework assignments and for whatnot. Is that okay? All right. This is not the only way to do it. If you say, I don't like videos, I don't want to use online resources to help me during the test, because some people don't like to have to flip between different screens and stuff like that. They want everything on paper because now you can just spread it out, and it's more tactile. That's fine too. Okay, use whatever is going to help you the most. Okay, we all study differently. All right. Any questions? No questions? All right. So I'm going to close this. Oh, I discovered one more thing that may be very helpful during the test. I found out, how, especially for those of you who bring your own laptop computer. Okay, so you might want to pay attention. Okay, there's a motion sensor in front of you. Okay, you can see the motion sensor. So the motion sensor is only one of the ingredients to turn on what they call the energy saver plugs. Okay, so if you look at your energy saver plugs, okay, when you look at the outlet, these things are already they're taped in. There are several LEDs. One is called master, which is always on. One is, I take it back. There's one plug that says always on, and that one, as the name implies, is always on. And there's one called master. The master is on when there's motion. Okay, so if you wave your hand, if something is already off, you wave your hand, the master will turn on. But there's also one called energy saver. The energy saver is not going to turn on until the monitor gets out of the sleep state. Okay, so if I press any key here, bring the monitor out of its sleep, then the energy saver will turn on when there's motion. So it's a multiple thing to make the energy saver plugs turn on. So if you're using your laptop computer, there are two things you need to do. One is to make sure you don't block the motion sensor thing. And the second thing is you want to keep the PC monitor on by clicking a shift key or moving the mouse, once in a while. And I know this is really, really not, it's really contrary to what this device is supposed to do. What do you think this device, your little adapter thing, is supposed to do with the motion detector? What is the objective? What is the value? Why would somebody install something like that?
To basically cause the pain.
No, that's not the original purpose, because there are better ways to do that. There are much more cost-effective way to do that. Yeah, you just forget about the whole motion sensor thing. You just randomly turn off the plugs. That would annoy people to no end. No, that's not the objective. What do you think it's for?
To make sure that the workstation is being occupied and there's actually a person here as opposed to it not being used.
And in order to do what? What is the objective?
Cut back on electrical
Yes,
use.
to save power, right? To save energy. Okay? So the original idea of these things is to save energy. Okay? If no one is using the computer, it turns it off. It turns off the monitor, turns off the auxiliary power supply. So what do we ended up doing? Making them waste more energy. Because when you have a laptop computer, you have to force the monitor on the main PC to be on in order for your laptop to get the power to charge itself or to maintain its charge. So that defeats the whole purpose. Okay, it just defeats the whole purpose of having these devices in the first place. So anyway.
So are they planning on changing that when they change the function?
Oh, you mean when we have our new building? Yeah, I will definitely ask them to get rid of these things. It's just ridiculous. It doesn't work the way it's supposed to, and it's not friendly to BYOD. Bring your own device. Okay, because most people do it exactly like this, right? You put your computer right in front of the power supply, which blocks the motion sensor. But once you block the motion sensor, it doesn't sense your motion, so it won't turn. So it will, your energy saver is off all the time, so you won't be able to charge your laptop computer. Yeah, so you have to move hand here and then turn on the monitor by just clicking it somewhere. And after a little bit of time, then wave your hand again. Then now it's on. It's on. Yep. So anyway, this might be important during the test if you bring your own laptop computer, just in case you run out of charge or something. Just remember you have to go through this gyration to get it to work. Or you can just turn off the desktop, plug your computer into the always on, then you're all set too. Just remember to plug it back on to the other one when you're done. Because otherwise the next class coming in will go like, hey, my computer is not on, and they go like, oh, it's not even plugged in. Okay, any questions? Okay,
So we're going to use the online, we can use these computers because
Mhm.
we're not going to be using an emulator to be able to use a wireless connection, is that right?
Well, you will have to find a way to debug the application. So that's the thing. You can always, that's a good question. If you have your laptop computer, that's not an issue because you can run whatever you want. Okay, you cannot use your own your own mobile device, because the router here does not let you do that.
Right. So we should bring a laptop in to be able to get the.
I think that's the safest way to do it. Or you can just do it the way that I do it, which is using Linux, and then use the emulator, to work alongside with App Inventor.
Okay.
So you do have a choice, but you kind of have to figure out, which way you think what you want to do.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. All right. Any other questions? Yep.
What's the URL again, please? The URL for your main videos?
It's just on YouTube. So if you go to YouTube and look for some profs as a channel, it's all going to be there.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you just go to YouTube, and just look for some profs. So you type some profs with a slash after the youtube.com. So that will bring you directly to my channel, and then in my channel you click videos, and that will show you all the recording. But not only for this class, so you have to kind of filter that by the name of the class. Is that okay?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay. Good. All right. So if there are no additional questions, what I'll do is I'm going to bring up an experimental feature of App Inventor, because we want to be able to store information on a remote database, and different instances of your application should have access to it. So we'll go ahead and start a new project, and we'll call it Remote Database, Remote DB. And it's listed under experimental because it is experimental. So this may or may not be something that you want to use for your project. You might want to do some tests first just to make sure that it does work the way you want it. So I'm going to click on the question mark here, and I know this is way too small for us to read. So let's go ahead and click on more information. This way I can just zoom into this screen. Too much. There we go. Oh, let's do a little bit too much. Let me find the right magnification. Okay, I think that's good. Okay, this is called Firebase DB. It's a non-physical component that communicates with Firebase, which is a product from Firebase.com, to store and retrieve information. Okay? And if you just kind of go through the properties, it kind of gives you an idea of what you can do with it. The first two are, one is called a bucket and one is called a token, and both of these can only be entered in designer view. You cannot change it in your blocks. Okay, so that means you can only once it is determined in the designer, you cannot change it in the blocks. This is what you need to sign in to your own database. Okay, so you have to pay for and then get a token to represent that yes, I am who I am. That's your authentication method. You will also provide a URL. Okay, this one does give you the ability to change on the. This is returning. Okay, this is basically just returning the URL that you have entered elsewhere. There are several events that they can handle. The first one is really interesting. The first one is called data changed. So that means your application is getting a event. It will raise an event when something has changed in that particular database, which means you don't have to poll the database. You don't have to ask the database again and again. It's like, okay, did something change? Did something change? Did something change? If something changes, your app gets an event. And we'll get an event of which tag got changed to what value. So I think that is a really, really helpful feature, okay? Because you can say, if you're monitoring certain things in your app and somebody else is updating the database, your app gets notified when something is changed. If the Firebase database somehow encounters an error, it will raise an event with the actual error message itself. And once you request the value of a particular tag, it will take a little bit of time before the results comes back. When it does come back, it will raise this particular event. Okay, so we are talking about something called asynchronous communication, where you make a request and then your event handler is done. But when the request is answered, it will raise another event to say that, okay, about that thing that you asked earlier, now I have the answer, do something with it. Okay. And then here we have get value. Now this is not the same get value as the other TinyDB. What this one does is it is just a request. This block is done as soon as the request is sent. Okay? And it will wait, you have to wait until the other event raises, which is got value, okay, to tell you what it is. This one is really just saying, I want to get the value of this particular tag. And if it's not found, I want this to be its value. So right after this block, off it goes, okay? The request is sent over the internet to the actual database. And then your program moves on and do whatever else it needs to do without the actual answer to this question. Because it might take you half a second, it might take you 2 seconds, or even more for the answer to come back. You don't want your application just to hang up and do nothing during those 2 seconds. So when the answer of that question comes back, this event gets raised, and then go like, okay, about that thing that you asked 2 seconds ago, now we have the answer. Okay. This is also a request. Okay, store value is a request. It is basically saying, okay, overwrite the current value of this tag with value to store. Okay, but once again, it is just a request. You can also use the do it function on this block so that you wait for the whole thing to be done. All right. Are there any questions about the basic idea of how to use Firebase? No questions? But I think from reading your project proposals, I would say half the entire class can use something like this if your app is to be a published app. Because this does allow multiple installations of the same app to share the same database. So it can be very helpful. So the next thing we'll do is we'll go ahead and check out Firebase, because that's the website that hosts this particular database. Okay. And we can sign up with Moodle. Okay, Firebase Essential for Android. Focus on the user, start building, build from any device, build fast. Okay. All right. Well, before we do anything else, I'm going to check for pricing. So there is a free account, which is great. Okay. So let's check out the limitations of your free account. Can everybody read this screen, sort of? Okay. Just remember, it's on firebase.com. Okay. So here's free account. You have 100 connections. Your database will be limited to 100 devices connecting at the same time. Okay. So that means if you have a little experimental app and you think I might have up to 20 users using this database at the same time, you're fine. On the other hand, if you think, okay, my app is going to go viral and I will end up with 500,000 of users, then the free account is not going to cut it. Okay. and you have to pay $50 a month to get to the unlimited account. Okay, the $5 per month account only has a 100 simultaneous connection as well. The second limitation is based on storage. Okay, how much stuff can you store in your database? The free account says you only have 1 gigabyte. Now we all look at 1 gigabyte and say, well, that's not a whole lot. You know, my little thumb drive has 16 gigabytes of storage. But you have to remember back in the days when we count everything in megabytes. Okay, 1 gigabyte is 1,000 megabytes. That's a lot of stuff. Okay, if you're only talking about storing information, like when somebody has taken an exam or stuff like that, it will take a lot to fill it up 1 gigabyte. I mean, that's just a lot of stuff. Okay, so it's really not that little. Okay, 1 gigabyte is a lot from our perspective. Transfer is 10 gigabytes. That means each month you can only transfer up to 10 gigabytes, into and out of your database. So that means, if you have a lot of traffic, even if the database itself is tiny, if you have a lot of traffic, it can still exceed the 10 gigabyte bandwidth limitation. Next item, private backup, is a cross here, which means you cannot perform your own backup of your database. Authentication is unlimited, okay, so that's good. Hosting is 1 gigabyte. Transfer is 100. Okay, let me see. Real-time database is different from hosting. I don't think we're dealing with any hosting here, so we're just dealing with a real-time database. So this part does not really apply to us. So the only difference between the $5 account and the $0 account is whether you can have your custom domain or not. And I don't think this is important because this is all buried inside your application anyway. Nobody gets to see the URL to your database except for your app. Okay, so I don't think that's an issue. Cool. So I'm going to give it a try. Before we do that, I'm going to click on additional information here. The Firebase DB component, experimental, and I'm going to zoom it out to the point where we can read it. Okay, so I'm just going to read it because I think people in the back may have some difficulty reading it. The Firebase DB component implements a shared key value store very similar to TinyWebDB. As the name implies, the backend of Firebase DB is the Firebase database offered by the company that we just saw a little bit earlier. And this is the interesting part, which is now part of Google. So you're looking at another Google product. Okay, it's originally a separate company like Android, and then Google bought it because it has synergy with everything else that Google is doing. And it says right here, comparing the TinyDB WebDB, the Firebase DB component is backed by a secure, robust database. So this is why it is important, is because the backend is secure. Okay, when you sign in, it is encrypted. So someone who's sniffing your traffic would not be able to get your token for signing into that database. You do not need to run your own service to use it. We are currently providing a quote-unquote public service. For the test server, this is my personal development account, so be gentle. We also plan to add support for people providing their own Firebase accounts, but this isn't working yet. Like TinyWebDB, you query the database via the get value and the store value blocks. Okay, that part we explained already. It adds an additional event, data changed, so we talked about that already. You do not need your own Firebase account. MID is providing access to a shared account. Even though this account is shared, each developer has their own variable space, which is separate from all other users. Using this shared account, you can create multiple applications that share variables, but bad grammar here. I need to find out which one it's supposed to be. But two different developers cannot share variables between apps that each own separately. You can also create your own Firebase account. However, we do not recommend that you do so at this time, as we have not completed support for private Firebase accounts. So how to set it up? Okay, the Firebase token property will automatically be set up for you. Do not edit it. Okay, so this is work in progress. Okay, it is still experimental. For your project, okay, if you're not going to store anything that has privacy issues, that has security issues, I think this is okay. Okay, if you're only using it to test features, that's okay too. So in your case, if you are tracking the last day that people have taken a particular exam, if you're not using their real names, and there's no private information, I would say just go ahead and use it as a test platform. But when it is time to store actual name of people who have taken that test, then you may want to wait until they have support for your own database. Just so that you handle the privacy part is handled correctly.
Sure. And I did notice earlier in the instructions there that it said that the store value does not generate
A asynchronous event to say that it's done.
Right. So
Yeah.
what you'd have to do to verify that it got in there, I guess, would be to get it and then get the got value from it to verify that it was actually set up.
I think it was also mentioned that there's a quote unquote do it block, which basically won't leave until it is done.
Oh, okay.
But it will block the rest of your app. So during the time that it is actually trying to store the value, the rest of your app won't be responsive at all. You can click on stuff and nothing is going to happen.
I see.
So there will be a lag involved in that. But you can always warn the user and say, okay, click this button, but it might take 2 or 3 seconds before the app is reacting again.
Right, because
So-
I want to make sure that people knew
Right.
that it had actually taken it,
Mhm.
before they move on.
Yep. So let's go ahead. I'll just go ahead and give it a try. Okay, because this sounds like something that many of your projects can use. Just remember, don't store anything that has privacy issues or security issues. So I won't store passwords, for instance, using this mechanism. Yeah. I think you guys know who you are. Okay, do you know whether your app requires remote storage like this? Okay. Okay. In your case, people who yes, background you. Because your app, is asking, is having 2 types of users, right? You have people who need to have snow shoveled, and then people with a shovel to offer their service to shovel snow.
Yeah.
Okay, so you will need something like this. Okay, and I think the notify feature is going to be very helpful, because someone who's sitting in a truck with a shovel can get a notification and say, oh, there's a new request. Okay, somebody just put in a request to shovel snow, and the app can wake up and go like, okay, there's a new request, this is what it is, do you want to take it on?
So, but I would have to add the page feature on there, right?
You will have to what?
I would do that because looking at it, I don't think I can actually add the one that's for free, right? Because you're storing personal information.
Well, but for testing purposes you can use this feature.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
All right. Yep, go ahead.
What's the difference between the tiny web DBs and the tiny that are?
This one is more secure.
That's pretty much it, or?
And it also has a new event. It has the notify event, I think. Yeah, it has a notify when changed event. So I'll just go ahead and give it a try. Okay, so we'll go ahead and drag this component over, and it warns me this is an experimental feature which may change in the future or break. Okay, that's fine with me, not a problem. Alright, so the next thing we'll do is we are going to put in a little bit of user interface here, and I'm going to put in a text box. Okay, so I can enter a value. I'll put in a button to update the value. In fact, I'll put in 2 text boxes. So let's go put in 2 text boxes. Come on. Okay, 2 text boxes and 2 buttons. And now I cannot tell which text box is which text box, so we'll go ahead and use arrangement for that purpose. So we'll go to layout, pick out a horizontal arrangement. We'll do 2 horizontal arrangements. So each one is going to have a text box.
A question for
Yep.
you.
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of working on my project, and
Yep.
I was having a hard time figuring out how to put things on there. I mean, is it best to always put it on a horizontal or vertical arrangement or canvas? Like, what is the best?
It depends on what you're trying to do. Okay, like what I'm trying to do here is I want one text box to be to represent the key of a key pair. So I'm going to say, what is the key? So that's, you can see the key. It's just a caption so that, people who enter the text here know what it is about. And then with this one, I want this to be the value associated with that key. And then the buttons are just, one to store and one to retrieve. So this one is to store, and the other one is to retrieve.
I guess, like, if you wanted to just put buttons,
Mm-hmm.
maybe to store data, like a certain, give them a value each time you press whatever button, on the user interface. But I wanted them to be kind of all over, not just a perfect.
Okay, so you have to think about, the best or the most flexible way you can do it is a table arrangement. Yes, it's a table arrangement. So a table arrangement under layout, which is this one here. It's a 2-dimensional type of layout. You have columns and then you have rows. But everything in the same column will still have to line up vertically. Everything in the same row still has to line up horizontally.
So I just put multiple tables with.
You can put
Different
arrangements inside arrangements if that is going to help you, but your screen is only so big, right? So it has to be kind of a special thing where you will need to have an arrangement inside an arrangement, because with a 300 pixel or so width screen, there's really only so much you can do. But that gives you an option. You can have arrangements inside arrangements if that's going to help you. But you have to kind of do some experimentation, and find out, okay, if I cannot get to do what I really want to do, is there an alternative that is still acceptable to me? Okay. All right, so with this one, I'm going to get rid of the table arrangement because it's just for demonstration. So we get rid of that. And we probably want to rename the text boxes a little bit, just so that I can tell which one is which one. So this one is called text box 2 by default. I will rename that to text box key because it really stores the key of the key value pair. And then this one here, we will rename it to text box value. That. And then the 2 buttons also need different names because otherwise I cannot differentiate which one is which one. So this is button store. And this one is going to be button retrieve. There we go. So now we have all the major components here. And we take a look at the component Firebase DB1 because the documentation that we just read has some interesting things to say about it. So you can see that the Firebase token is already filled in. And according to the documentation, we shouldn't change it. Just let it be. Okay, leave it like that. The Firebase URL is default. Just leave it, let it be. And then the project bucket is remote DB, which is based on the name of this particular project. So we let it be also. Okay. So what this means is if you have a different project, because of the name of the projects being different, they naturally have a different bucket. So you have one bucket. You can have one bucket per application. Is that okay? But it also means if you turn your app project into an APK file and install the APK file on multiple computers, they will all be accessing the same bucket, which is the whole idea. Is that right? Is that okay? Okay. All right. So the first thing we'll go ahead and do is switch to the box, and then say, okay, the only one thing that should trigger an operation would be the buttons. Once again, this is object-oriented programming. Okay, we look at the component that is responsible for the action and go, okay, let's go there first. So let's go to store, okay, and we'll pick out an event that we want to handle. Click. Okay, so when store is clicked, we want to do something. We want to store whatever the text boxes has, in content into the database. Okay. But before we do anything else, I just want to use this as an opportunity to revisit some of the concepts that we have talked about. So we want to make sure that we do have something to store first. So we're going to say if then, okay, because we want to make sure that we only store something when there is a value to store. If you want to check if something is empty or not, you can always use this, okay? But it's not going to be standalone. So what we want to do is to see if the text value of the text boxes are empty or not. So we go to the text boxes. Once again, object-oriented programming. Okay, we ask the question: who owns it? Okay, who owns that property? This is one of the this is one of them. And we go here and we say, give me your text value, and I want to see if it's empty. Is that okay? So this entire thing, okay, combining is empty and textbox key dot text is asking, is the text value of textbox key, is it empty or not? Okay, it'll give me a either true or false value. Is that okay? Sort of? Okay. All right. But this is only one of the things that I have to do. So I'm going to duplicate this because I also want to make sure the value that I'm storing is also not empty. So now I have two of these things. There are two ways to do this. You can use a nested conditional statement to deal with this. In other words, the outer conditional statement will check the key, and then the inner conditional statement will check the value. Okay, you can do it that way because you cannot get through both of them until they're both not empty. On the other hand, the more logical way to do this is to go to logic and then pick out a conjunction, which we normally call an AND, and you just say if this is not empty, oops, I forgot one thing, because this only confirms that it is empty, so we want to use the negation, which is just a not, to say that if it is not empty, and if that is not empty, then we want to put this into the first part of the AND, put that into the second part of the AND. So now we have the logic to specify that if both the key and the values are not empty, then we'll go ahead and store it. Is that okay? All right. Okay. So then we go to the Firebase DB, and yep, go ahead.
Can you go over how you would use I think it's the low location sensor?
Okay, not now, not right now.
Well, when you get a chance.
Yeah, you can put it on a list of things that you want to talk about, but right now I need to finish this one first. There was another hand. Yeah. Oh, okay. All right, so we want to store a value, so we just go here and go store value. And it is a call. The tag is the key, okay? I call it a key, but TinyDB likes to call it the tag. So we'll go ahead and retrieve the tag, which is here. This is the one that is used as the tag. And the value to store is this part here. Right click, duplicate, and put it here. Okay. And if I hover, it says it'll ask Firebase to store the given value under the given tag. And as what we have talked about a little bit earlier, the store it's not this one, this one here. Okay, the store has a particular thing that we can do. If you're having difficulty with the companion, you're switching between, okay, that's not it. You can just, you can use the do it function on this block in the blocks editor. Okay. So where is the do it? Do it function on this block. Okay, so there's no way to confirm that it has been stored. Well, we'll go ahead and give it a try like that. And then we have one more button to retrieve the value. So we'll go ahead and handle that one first. So we go to retrieve, we specify a click event, stash it here, and we're going to replicate this block here. But we are not going to replicate the entire thing, because the only thing I need to be sure that is not empty is the key. So I can take out this block here, take this one, put it into the trash can, and then put this back here, because I just need to make sure the key is not empty. And then what we'll do is we'll get rid of the store value, because this time we are retrieving, we're trying to get a value. We go to Firebase DB, we go to the get value one, put it here, and this is my tag. So we go too many scrolling. So we get this one as the tag, and the value, if tag is not here, is just space. Okay, that's fine. So what this will do is it is just going to send the request. It is not going to get the value itself. So now we need a third event handler, which says, when FireDB comes back with an answer, then we'll go ahead and update something. So now I click on Firebase and DB1, and this time I want to look at its event handlers. God value is what we want. Okay, so we get a God value here. It makes me wonder, if you are storing a value, whether you will also get the value changed event. So maybe that's your ticket to confirm that something is actually stored.
Oh, okay.
So I'll do a little experiment to find out. Okay. Okay. So Firebase DB1 got value will give you both the tag and the value. The reason why you're getting both of these information is because you can send off two requests to update two different tags at the same time, close to at the same time. Those two requests may not come back at the same time. Okay, so that's why when you do get a confirmation that you got a value, it has to tell you it got the value of which tag, because you may have several pending requests to get values. So it has to tell you which one is getting. Which also means inside here, you really need to look at the tag first to determine what you're going to do with it. So this is the tricky part of event-driven programming, is because it's fragmented in a way. So you need to sometimes you need to use your own variable, use your own logic to rethread the same logic sequence. Okay, because it is fragmented using this particular mechanism. All right, so getting back to this one, so what we'll do is we are going to, I'm not sure whether I want to do it or not. Probably not, because we only have one tag here, so I'm going to assume that we are going to put this into the text value of my value text box. So we'll just go straight away, right away. Well, we can do it that way. So we'll go to the text box for the value, and it will set the text of the text box value directly to the value that we are getting notified. Okay? I'm not even checking anything, which I should be, but I'm not doing it. Okay. Any questions? All right, so we'll test this program now first, okay, before I add any more stuff to it. And to run this, I have to start up the emulator first. So the usual stuff. Here, AI starter. And once I have that, I can switch back here and say connect to emulator. And then just wait a little bit. If this works, I think it's great because many of you can make use of this feature so that you can have an actual app. It's not the most efficient way to do it, but nonetheless it gives you a mechanism to do it. So you can have one app where you can have multiple users and they can all quote-unquote communicate through this mechanism. It's kind of like a tiny DB that is shared between instances of installations. And this stuff will not be in your first exam. Okay, it's too experimental for one thing. But it does jive really well with the concept of lists. Uh-oh. He complained. I guess it is experimental. It's a Java issue on the other side, so it's not something that we can do anything about. Oh, great. Okay, let me see if it is still connected. Okay, it's still connected. And I'm going to switch back to remote DB to give it a second chance to run. Probably not going to work. It thinks it's working, but it's not.
In my case, it says that Android is too old to use the Firebase.
Well, everything is done through App Inventor, so the version of Android should not really matter.
It says the version of Android.
Oh, does it say that?
Yeah, it says that.
With an emulator? Okay. Which means it might work with an actual Android device. If I do that on my phone, you won't be able to see it, but at least I can tell you whether it works or not. So give me a moment here when I do this. Okay. So I'm going to build it as an APK. Because I haven't set up my QR code scanner. And then we'll go ahead and use Gmail. Just send it to myself. Okay, I got the email. Got the app. It's installing. App is not getting installed. To check my developer option. Now, which part says that you can install apps that are outside of the source? I think it's under applications. Okay, let's check that. App permission. Does anyone remember, where do you set the option to let you install any APK file, even without a signature?
I haven't done it yet, so I can.
Oh, okay.
You want to use my phone? I have it installed.
Oh, okay. Did you give it a try?
It showed up.
It showed up? Okay. So put in some values. And then there's one option that says whether you allow
It works.
it works?
Fine.
Okay. Alright, cool. So we have verification that it does work, but it does need a later version of Android. Which means you cannot use the emulator to debug this type of app anymore. You need a device that has a relatively new version of Android installed. But it does work. So it is a good opportunity. This is a really kind of excellent feature to have. It's just that our emulator won't work anymore, so I need to find a different way to show you guys how it runs and stuff like that. There's probably some kind of remote screen utility that I can run so you can see my screen from the projector, so I'll have to figure out how to get that done. Okay, we are running out of time today in the lecture, so I'm going to stop the lecture. And then if you guys have any questions about the material that we have talked about that will be in the next in the exam next week, let me know during the lab time. Or if you want to kind of experiment with this, this is probably a good time to do it too.
Can we use the source lab for local devices?
Sorry?
Can we use the source lab for local
Source?
devices? Source lab. Like, there are some local devices in there that we can use. Source lab.
She's talking about the resource center.
Resources?
Resource center.
Resource Center. Oh, LRC?
No.
No?
SACU. LABS.
Okay, maybe I can take a look during the lab time. Alright. So I'm going to stop the recorder and we'll take a little break, 10-minute break, for those of you who want to stay here and do some studying. And I'll be uploading